Welcome to Neutral Voices, and this is Fort Wayne Up Close, brought to you by ONV. And tonight we're getting closer than close with Miss. Now I want to get this right.
Raleigh.
Raleigh
Yes.
Booker. See, we just be up here like Raleigh Booker. Right. So I love that.
Thank you.
Raleigh. Now, do you have
Raleigh.
a hard time getting people to put that little space, that
You
little
know
pause
what?
in there, or you just say whatever?
No, not whatever.
Okay.
I'll tell people how to say my name. It's just,
Okay.
I don't know, it's difficult, I guess, for sometimes
Yeah.
people to hear it. They want to say Raleigh because that's something that they're just
Yes.
more comfortable or, it's more common. But it's Raleigh. It's a combination name.
Okay,
Yeah, that's
I
good.
love it. And maybe you'll share with us where that name
Sure.
originated from, and we're going to get into all of that. But before we get started, Clarence,
Yes, ma'am.
would you like to pray us in?
Yes, ma'am. Let us pray. Our dear Heavenly Father, we just come thanking you for this opportunity. Thank you for your grace and your mercy, dear Heavenly Father. As we come to enlighten your people, Lord, let us speak something that would touch hearts and open up minds. Thank you for our guest. Continue to bless her in her way that she can keep doing your work, dear Heavenly Father. Bless those that are on the panel and bless those that are behind the scenes. In your son, Jesus' name, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you for joining us. This is Fort Wayne Up Close, and we have the very special 6th District Councilwoman, Miss Raleigh Booker. Did I get it right?
So close.
So close.
Yeah.
Raleigh.
Okay.
Raleigh.
Raleigh.
Yes.
Okay, so anyway, we're gonna get it right tonight. So y'all learning something right here already. Anyway, so we do want to get into all of the what's going on now because I know there's so much, and I'm just tell you, I'm fussing about some things every time I'm driving down the street. It seems like it's just so much construction. So we can get into all of what's going on with that. But before we do, we want the people to know and get close to
Raleigh.
Councilwoman, look, watch, I'm getting ready to go different way. Councilwoman Booker, if you don't mind, share a little bit, a lot of bit, however you feel it. Share with us all about yourself.
Oh,
Because you have such a major journey getting to where you are today. So share what you're comfortable sharing with us.
okay. Well, I was raised in Fort Wayne. I'm a graduate of Southside High School. My family has lived here for a long time. My grandmother used to have a restaurant on Pontiac Street, and it was called Barbecue King.
What?
She did, yeah. So I was raised in the church,
Yeah.
and I moved away from Fort Wayne, and I was gone for about maybe 12 years. I lived in Indianapolis before I came back in 2018 with my 3 sons. I have 3 boys, 14, 12, and 11.
Wow.
And that's really when I started to get involved in politics. I'd always been involved in the community that I lived in, whether it was Fort Wayne or Indianapolis or when I was, in school at Ball State, but always doing some sort of service, always working in the community in some capacity. But yes, my political journey started when I moved back to Fort Wayne.
Wow.
Yeah.
With those 3 amazing boys. And so obviously the education system. So I know you from that, the school board.
Right.
And so education, just a little bit. I want to talk about that because you were, I'm going to say behind the scene, you were involved in education from a different perspective. So with that, real quick, what do you think about the education system, student achievement, or however you want to look at it from your perspective, the things that you saw, some of the greatest challenges? I know that they were having issues with the graduation rate at one time. So if you could speak to the parents and kind of help them figure out which way they need to approach dealing with their child, the school system, etc. If you could speak to that a little
So
bit.
really one of the reasons I came to serve on the school board in the summer of 2020. The person who served in my seat for District 4, Jordan Lebemoff, passed.
Yeah.
And so that spot became open, and I had a couple people who were close to me come to me and say, Raleigh, you need to try to get in this spot. You will be good for it. They knew that I was very involved in my son's education. Education is really important to me. It was something that was just ingrained in me from, forever. My grandmother always says, get an education, get an education. You have to get an education to really get ahead in this world and in this country. And I know that there are difficulties that Black boys face. I have 3 boys, and so I made sure that I was always present in my kids' lives as far as, education is concerned. One thing that I would say to parents, and not just parents of Black boys, but any parents, is to get to know your kids' teachers, especially,
Be involved.
you have to be involved, and not just when something bad happens. So one of the things that I learned early on about my oldest child is that he was a perfectionist. He was getting in trouble in first grade, and I have good kids. And so when I was getting calls about my oldest son, I was like, wait a minute, something's going on.
Right.
And so I went in, I talked to the teacher. She was a nice lady. We talked about some of the issues that he had and when he was having issues during certain times. And I figured out my baby's a perfectionist. And so he was getting frustrated because she was trying to rush him in, in doing his work. But it took
He wanted to get it right.
He wanted to get it right.
Yes.
And so we figured that out. We worked together. And I always tell, my boys' teachers, like, we're a team. Like, this is not just you doing this job. I have to do my job at home. We're working together. And so we were able to work and put certain things in place when it came to his learning that smoothed all the wrinkles out. And so the very next year, when he moved on to the next grade, I went in and I said, I need to talk to you about my son. This is my son. These are his strengths. These are things that he is challenged with. These are the things that I have found that helps. I understand I don't have a perfect child, and we are a team, and I am supporting you, and I need that same support. And I just did that with every single child. I would go in, and I would volunteer when I could. There was a time where I had a job where I could not do that, and I know that is a privilege.
Yes.
And I know that is something that some people just cannot do. But for me, I made sure that I showed up. I would go in, and just so that the teacher felt supported by me, I would help other kids in the classroom.
Wow. You do not hear that often.
That
Now
is
you're
so
talking
true.
about hands-on. So you were truly
Yes.
hands-on from every perspective. And I know you're definitely big on engagement, and we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Absolutely.
But so that's a good word, I would say, for parents.
Yes.
And Clarence, you want to speak to that?
Yeah. Well, one is I was going to ask, I was going to make a statement, and I was going to commend you, because a lot of parents don't go in as I want to help. A lot of parents, and we need to correct this. We go in, you're not going to do this to my child. My child ain't did this, and we have to change our thought process when we go in there. Go in there understanding, willing to listen, willing to cooperate instead of placing blame. But I wanted to ask a question before we move forward. You talked about the education side. I want to talk about education too, but mine is more of a political side. And I'm going to say this, because why is it that, if I'm a taxpayer and my tax money going to this big old pool, why does my school district get the least of the tax money? I talked to somebody, an assessor, and he broke it down with, the numbers, the demographics. But my thing is, if Northwest Allen County, Southwest Allen County, Northeast Allen, Southwest, East Allen, they're all in Allen County. So we're paying Allen County taxes. Why is Fort Wayne Community Schools the least on the budget?
I wouldn't say that we get necessarily less. Sometimes we get a little bit more. So if there is for certain students, so we get additional funding if we have schools who are below the poverty rate. We get additional funding if you have students who are special need. We'll get additional funding if you have students who are in ELL classes. The problem is, it's not enough. It is not enough. And it takes so much money to educate these students who fall into these different groups. And so that that's the issue. That's the problem. So even if you got, I don't know, $8,000, I'm just making up numbers, per student in Fort Wayne Community Schools, and you get it in Northwest Allen County schools, if you have a child who is living in poverty, is in special ed classes, and maybe English isn't their first language, it is going to take a considerably larger amount of money to educate those students than it will if you don't have all those different things. And so I think we're just underfunded. One of the things that we really advocated for as a board when I was at Fort Wayne Community Schools is increasing the funding that we receive for those students. And the state really didn't budge too much on that.
Wow. And is that because you need more one-on-one?
You need smaller classrooms.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You need smaller class sizes. There are certain schools where you have a high teacher turnover. So, having seasoned teachers make a difference. And there are certain teachers, they don't want to work at an urban school because we have all these different issues and challenges. They don't. And so, in some of the schools that had some of the worst achievement rates were the ones that had the highest turnovers. They had the youngest teachers. Right. Like the teachers would come in, they would get, a little experience, and then they would go to a different school district.
Wow.
So, there's so many things that factor into it. There really are.
So many things. And I know you talked to me a little bit at the beginning that there's so many things and so many directions we could speak on tonight. So kind of journey through and get us to where we are today. So something happened and you decided, okay, I'm going to move into this next position. So take us from there.
Yeah. So we talked a bit about student achievement and the struggle there. I remember one of my colleagues on the school board went to the different high schools where they have posted the top maybe 10 students in each class. And he pointed out the fact that in most cases in those high schools, there were 1 or 2 out of 10 that were African American. And why is that? And so that began the discussion of, you have to consider some of the situations that kids grow up in. You have to consider biases that teachers have. Yes. There are so many different things. You have to consider, I mentioned before that education was something that it was just expected of me, that there are families who, because of the experiences that they've had in education, they don't prioritize it. That's not something that kids are really pushed to do. They're not pushed necessarily to achieve in certain situations. So there's so many different things that are going on that results in our kids not achieving as high as other kids. And it was really frustrating. As much as we tried to do in a district and as much as we didn't do that we could have done in a district, I know that the community and how our community is and how successful we are is directly related to the education and vice versa. And in conversations we're like, well, we have over 70% of kids living in poverty. We have the highest rate of English language learners in our district, and we have all these different things. We have kids who are coming to school and they don't have coats, and we have kids who are coming late because their parents don't have cars, and on and on and on and on and on. And so the opportunity came for me to be able to sit on council and actually impact some of those things, and actually advocate for some of those things. And when it came along, I took the opportunity. I just felt like it was a natural progression from being on school board and seeing how those things impacted our students. And so that's what I did.
So I would say, so you kind of had insight. So you had this, I'll say this insight. And so moving forward, you knew some things that the average person that wasn't on the school board, wasn't privy to this information, they wouldn't have known. So this kind of put you in a position where you could play ball from a different perspective, I would say. And so you could advocate definitely much stronger and more intentional. And so with that, and now that you are the sixth district councilwoman, what so far, because it's only been a short while, but so far, what can you say you're proud to be a part of, or some changes that's occurring from the, from, I'll say, even that you put your hands in and had a part in?
One of the things that I was brought into early on was our issues with our transportation system here in the city. I'm on the board for CityLink, and we faced a substantial, I think it was a $2.5 million deficit in our budget last year that we projected for this year, 2025. And never in the history of the city has the city provided funding to our transportation system. But I was able to work even across the aisle and work with the administration to get $500,000, I believe, into that budget to help, help kind of sustain us. Yeah. CityLink has great leadership, and so that leadership has been very creative as far as things that they've changed as far as the way things are run, route efficiencies, just a number of different things to continue to keep us afloat. We still face a deficit. We don't get enough funding from the state. The funding has been flat for maybe 10 years, even though it takes a lot more operationally to run the transportation system. And they've advocated on a federal level and a state level. So, but that was one thing that I was really proud of, because I know how important transportation is.
It is very important. It would be great if they could figure something out for even a Sunday. And I only say that because people work on Sundays. And so, I've heard people kind of complain about that, and that's a big challenge.
It's a huge challenge, yeah.
Not only Sundays, and I heard you say route efficiency, so I know you can't go everywhere, but if there were more routes to places, transportation, personal transportation is getting hard with gas prices and people not having cars. But if they could run to like some factories, if they could run out a little further, I think that would be a benefit to our community as well, because that gives people access to getting to jobs instead of depending on this person. Like, why didn't a bus go to GM, one of our biggest employers in the city? Not everybody have a car. I know that people say, well, if they work at GM, they should afford a car. But what if I just started at GM? And I need to
so
get there?
You don't really have the opportunity afforded to you because of the lack of transportation.
Yes.
And that is huge. So I'm also, I'm director of mission advancement at Vincent Village, which is a transitional homeless shelter. And one of the things that I experienced with some of the residents was how lack of transportation limits opportunities, because it limits your options.
Yes.
Like you said, if you can't get to a place because of a location, that's not even an option to apply at a GM. We had people who were just trying to apply to places that were close to our shelter, which is Southeast, is off of Pontiac Street. And so it limits the types of jobs that you can actually apply for and get. It limits you being able to work at the hospital.
I was going to say, sound like a setup.
It limits your opportunities, and it really keeps you from being economically mobile. It really keeps you in a trap if you don't have transportation.
And, on all levels, because then when you think about it from that perspective, people are always talking about the food desert. So the jobs is the same. So, whatever you can reach.
Access. Access is everything. And when you don't have it, it greatly impacts the quality of your life or your ability to get yourself out of poverty if that is where you are.
Yes. So the journey, you're there now, and there's some big stuff going on, a lot of stuff. I was complaining about all of the construction that's going on. It seemed like every street I turned down, you got to leave home a lot earlier because you don't know if you're going to run into a detour, etc. So the budget, that was a big reveal, something that just happened. So talk to us about that.
Yeah. Well, first, before I get to the budget, I do want to say, and I'll transition into the budget from that. Yeah. I have heard people complain about the streets and why are all the streets getting done at the same time?
At the same time.
Well, the street department has to work on those projects during a certain time period. You know, the weather has to be right for them to do that. And I remember a time where we weren't getting our streets resurfaced, you know. And so when people started complaining about it, I was, you know, my thoughts, and sometimes depending on how comfortable the relationship of that person that I had with that person, I would say, you need to be glad we're getting our streets done.
And start complaining.
You don't complain, because we've been talking about SB1, which is the state budget that was approved at the beginning of this year. And your governor, in his attempt to cut property taxes, drastically reduced the amount of revenue that will come to cities, which means that the budget had to be chopped and screwed by the administration to be balanced, to make sure that we're still providing services, to make sure that people aren't, you know, losing their jobs. And so it put us in a really difficult situation. But, you know, I was glad to hit those corners and say, oh, you know, I knew in advance, but yeah, it feels good to ride down the street that's smooth.
I'm just waiting on, yeah.
It feels good. It feels good. But, you know, as far as the budget is concerned, the city council passed that last night. I did not vote to pass that budget, and I will tell you why.
Please tell us.
So I mentioned SB1 and the reduced amount of revenue that we will get in the form of property taxes. Our city is funded by property taxes and also local income taxes, and then miscellaneous revenue. And so because of that, the budget cut through the state, we get less revenue. So projects and departments and things that we do that we fund specifically with property taxes, we have to look at those things and say, okay, we have to defer projects. We have to defer purchases. And we had to go into, or the administration, I'm saying we, but the administration had to make the decision to go into our cash reserves, which is a savings, to add money to the budget so that it was balanced. The budget that we were presented with in 2026, I think it was actually a little bit less than the budget that was presented in 2025. So we're not doing any additional funding, but we're trying to just maintain, you know, services. And so the Republicans, my Republican colleagues on city council, thought that was a problem, that we were using some of our cash reserves. We have over $100 million in cash reserves, which is something we haven't had in, I don't know, decades, from what I understand. But like, I don't know about you, but in your budget, we have savings to use
for that purpose.
And so they made a big to-do about that $8.8 million that was infused into the budget, and the potential for more cash reserves to come out and support some things too. And so they went in with the agenda to cut 8.8, or actually, I think the number that they threw out was $10 million from the budget, from a budget that was already
strapped.
It was already strapped. It was already lean. The work had been done. One thing about Mayor Tucker is she loves neighborhoods, she loves people, and she is fiscally conservative. And so there was no, fluff. There was really nothing to cut. And so they started cutting things that really would impact neighborhoods. So they had $17 million worth of cuts. We have these cut lists that we propose, and then we debate them during council. But $17 million worth of cuts based on the fact that we got less property tax revenue, but $14 million worth of those cuts were local income tax funds. So it was really about the headlines. It was they weren't doing anything to really offset the cost or the loss of the property taxes that we weren't getting. It was, in my opinion, just to be able to say that they cut from the budget and counting on people not knowing the difference and not really understanding what that really meant. And so one of the things, the reason why I did not approve the budget, one of the things that they cut was $1 million from the Southeast area strategy implementation. And I know you all are familiar with our plan. It's a plan for economic development, reinvestment in Southeast Fort Wayne. For decades, we have been underinvested in. Now, people Southeast pay property taxes. They get our local income tax money, and they were spending it everywhere but Southeast.
Okay.
And so that plan came about to say, hey, these are the things that are needed. These are the things that will help drive economic development Southeast. The mayor and administration at that time and the council at that time decided that they were going to provide, I think, for maybe about 5 or 6 years, because I think our budget, we have we have different parts of our budget. We don't just see numbers for this year. Sometimes they'll forecast projected. So we're going to give, up to $2.5 million Southeast. I'm just making that number up, but it's close to $2.5 million every year for like the next 4 or 5 years to help support some of the projects in Southeast implementation. And so in an effort to get to their $10 million low-hanging fruit, they looked at Southeast implementation and they decided to cut $1 million from what the city proposed to spend to help with some of those projects.
Yeah. Now, I commend you for standing on that because, Southeast, we get crumbs. We don't even get a full slice of bread most of the time, let alone do we see the loaf. So let alone, But, and I understand business is business, and I do understand that you do have to, sacrifice some things to bring some things in. But things like the great tax abatement, tax abatements that they give, I understand you can give a tax abatement for 10, 20 years, but they're giving hundreds of years of tax abatements on some projects. Like GM, I think they're still under a tax abatement, and they've been here, 30 years?
So what happens is you can renew those. They'll renew them. And there are certain guidelines with tax abatements, like if you can add jobs or if you can guarantee that you'll have a certain number of jobs that provide, a certain annual salary and things like that. But yeah, it's one of the tools in the economic development toolbox to really incentivize businesses to either come or stay. And whether or not we overuse that is definitely up for debate.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. I mean, at some point, because we talk about welfare and everybody up in arms about, SNAP getting cut and things like that. But we don't look at corporate welfare where they get, these tax abatements, they get all these other things that take from budgets and things, and they don't put back as much in as they take. So I think that that's something that should be reviewed, because I don't know what Google's is, but I hear it's high and I hear it's long. So, I mean, things such as that.
Absolutely. And that's definitely something that this particular council has an appetite for. Those are things that we've had conversations about, reviewing the criteria that people have to meet, maybe increasing the amount of the annual salary that they have to meet to qualify for an abatement, or increasing the number of jobs that you have to bring. So that's definitely something that has been in discussion. And I think that's a great point. We really do have to consider these abatements. It is potential tax revenue that we could be getting to fund services in our city. And so we just went through a review process, not a review process, but we reviewed abatements. And we had a number of businesses that we took their abatements back. They're no longer eligible for them. They didn't meet the criteria.
I mean, that's good. I mean, why continue to let them get away with not doing what they're supposed to?
Yeah. So that is definitely something that we do, that we're working on, that, again, this council definitely has an appetite for reviewing that to make sure that we are getting the best deals for our city.
That's good. Okay, so your focus right now, when you wake up in the morning, going to work, you have a focus, work focus. Mm-hmm. Within that, what is your heart focus? You say, I'm all in right here. I'm advocating for. What is it?
I think that there was a lot of work and time and effort put into the Southeast strategy update. I feel like it's our North Star. It is a document that helps to guide investment in Southeast. And so making sure the implementation of that plan continues is really what I would like to do. Another thing that is really important to me is just improving the conditions of our neighborhoods, holding landlords accountable for how they keep, some of these rental properties. One thing that I did this summer, I started this summer, and I actually had an event this evening, is doing community events where I go out, give out hot dogs, talk to people, ask them what's going on in their neighborhoods, give them a chance just to connect to me, because I'm a real person.
Thank you.
And I think that, and I think that they don't see us as people, but I tell people I'm somebody's mama.
Right.
And I'm working for my kids and I'm working for my community. So giving them a chance to interact with me and share with me and let me share, my heart with them. But in walking and knocking on doors, said, Lord, these sidewalks, I would take pictures of sidewalks and send it to Public Works. And I'm like, some of these look like Jumanji over here. There's so many cracks.
Right. Go over there on Oxford, the corner of Warsaw and Oxford Street. Look at those curves and
Yeah. I do that all the time. And so just improving the conditions of our neighborhood, really addressing the infrastructure, which is why that Republican caucus taking $1 million from potential
$1 million
infrastructure projects.
I was going to say that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
We can fix some curbs.
That's a lot of money. And their answer was basically find it somewhere else.
Wow.
Well, and I do have a question.
Sure.
And I know you might not have anything to do with it, but being, we got to get you guilty by association, right? Mm-hmm. I know they fixed up Brewer Park. I know they fixed up some other parks, but how did they skip over Weiser Park?
Listen, don't get me started on parks. So there's always a plan. There's always a plan. We're going to address this at this park. We're going to address this at that park. I had a conversation with the director, and he told me that, they have, I don't know how many acres, that they're responsible for in programs and community centers and buildings and all of these things. I take issue with the fact that they did just do Brewer Park. I think the city invested less than $200,000, maybe $150,000 on a multi-million-dollar park. So they can't even take credit. Like, they helped, guide the process and all that. I don't want to take away from the staff. Right, but as far as the investment is concerned, I bring up the fact that some of my favorite parks I love Foster Park. Mm-hmm. I love Lakeside Park. I go to the botanical gardens all the time. Mm-hmm. I love how they change out, the landscaping and all of that at Foster Park. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, there are certain parks that don't have one bulb.
That's right.
Right.
They don't have one bulb in it. I sent pictures of, a messed up surface in a small pocket park that little kids play at. And I'm like, it's just, there's no equity there.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
There's no equity there. And listen, I have time.
I got time.
We need to get as much investment in our parks. And so, there are parks that have not received a lot of funding or attention. Mm-hmm. And so that, I told you there's a lot of things. I can't do everything, but I probably try to do too much. But parks is also something that just really, it gets me going.
On the radar.
Right. Because, they say, parks and things bring life back to community.
They do. They increase property values.
Kids get out there. Yeah. So that's in the heart of our community, Weiser Park. And I know all of us at some point had some dealings in Weiser Park.
I was just at Weiser Park the other day.
So,
yes. And before we get out of here, because our time would be winding down here pretty quick. So speaking to the people, the community, you have an opportunity to share right now or to challenge the community. What do you need from the people? What do you need from us as far as engagement, etc.?
Yeah,
presence, our voice. What do we need to do?
I mean, definitely, you have to pay attention. You have to pay attention to what's going on. And I know there's so much information, and sometimes people, they feel overwhelmed because they don't understand like the political process or, even sometimes what city council does. And so one of the things that I've been doing and that I did tonight with the trunk or treat is I have information that I will stand there and tell them, like, this is what city council does. The street, those trees, the parks, these are things that we are responsible for. And so if these things aren't up to par, then I need to hear from you. And the city needs to hear from you. So we need for people to be engaged in what's going on in their neighborhoods and speak up about it. I think that people have gotten to the point where they have no expectations. They don't believe that not only that their voice matters, but they don't think that that their community matters anymore because of the disinvestment, because of how it looks. I think people have gotten used to living in situations and environments that they don't deserve to live in, that they shouldn't be living in, but it's the norm for them. And so making sure that people understand that this is not, you should speak up, you should use your voice, stay engaged. People are on social media all the time. There are certain people that you can follow to make sure that you know what's going on. I am working on getting better on social media, but you can follow me on social media, Rohli Booker, Rohli Booker. Just, search that and follow my council page. We have Councilwoman Michelle Chambers, who is really great at keeping her social media updated. We have the mayor, who is amazing. I mean, she has a whole team of people who are doing that so that you know what is going on in the city. So that's just the first step. And then letting us know what's going on in the neighborhood. And I know our time is out, but I will tell you one of the things that really just a huge takeaway that I've had since I've been on council is the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And our problem is we're not saying anything. We're complaining amongst each other, but we're not saying anything.
Loud enough in the right places.
Not in the right places. But the neighborhoods that know how to squeak and where to squeak, they get stuff done. They get stuff done for their neighborhood.
Squeak, squeak. Y'all hear that? Squeak, squeak. Everybody better hear that.
Yeah.
Because I believe that.
It's true.
The loudest squeak.
Yes.
You have to, and you have to be persistent. We say, oh, they don't care. It doesn't matter. They're not going to do anything anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said something in so I know we got to go, but I do want to kind of go back to this real quick. You said something about holding landlords. Can I call them slumlords right now?
You can call them whatever.
Accountable.
You have to.
Because some of the people, and I'm looking at some of the places that have, I guess, low income housing supposed to be approved, but it shouldn't be approved. I'm just saying some of the conditions that some people are living in. So what does that look like if somebody wanted to report? Because I'm a 211, I'll dial looking up stuff, 311, whatever. But who do you contact if you know that the landlord is just slumlord and you need to make some reports?
Yeah, I would do 311 and start reporting things. I mean, neighborhood code can come out, and find people and provide citations and things like that for structural things.
Okay.
Yeah, I would definitely do 311. It's hard though for sometimes people who live in affordable housing. They don't want to tell on the people,
right? Because they don't want to be homeless.
That's right. And
especially
so,
now.
yeah. So, one of the things I'm working on is what we can do as a city to really challenge landlords to keep their properties up. So it's it's something that I'm working on. Okay. Other communities have done things that I don't even have to get it, but other communities have done things to make sure that their residents aren't living in slums. And I think we can do better.
We got to do better. And Clarence, did you have one?
No, I was just going to say about the squeaky wheel. I do understand, it gets the oil. And you said people feel that their voice doesn't matter or anything. It has come a time, and there was a period of time where our voices were there, but they just weren't being heard. I think people are just disenchanted with that.
No, I understand. But, we can't give up. Because if you don't say anything, you can't expect for anything to change. And I know people get tired and sometimes our voices don't heard. But this is 2025. We have social media. We have people in positions, locally who are able to influence things. On city council, we are a 6-3 council, so 6 Republicans, 3 Democrats. But we have, a great mayor who is not afraid to advocate for us, who's running the city as well. And then we have great leaders, great organizations who who are doing great work. So we're not alone.
Yes.
If we can work together, if we can get behind this plan and get on the same page about things, I mean, we can be a force to be reckoned with. But it's when we're fragmented and we're not on the same page, that's when it's easy, divide and conquer and tire people out so that they lose the fight in them.
I love that. We got to get on the same page.
Yes,
I just
ma'am.
heard it from Councilwoman Rohli Booker. I am so happy that you were able to join us tonight.
Thank you for having
And
me.
yes, as we get closer to the elections and all of that stuff, I hope you come back and
I
visit
will.
and share
Absolutely.
all of the great things you have accomplished. And as we're exiting, Clarence, what would you like to share with the people?
Always protect your mind.